Okay, welcome everyone to our last PILI educational seminar of the season, incorporating pro bono into your career, where we bring in attorneys to talk about from their own experience how to make pro bono fit into our very busy professional lives. We are excited to have Priya Desai, who's an associate at Mayer Brown, Maggie Kamm, who's an associate at Reed Smith, and Christopher Johnson, who's was an associate at Hoffenberg and Block and is joining the state's attorney's office later in a few months.
Good story.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's just start. If we can go down the line, Priya, starting with you, introducing yourself briefly and sharing a little bit about your career path to your firm, current practice that what kind of area law you're working on, and at least for Priya and Maggie, your connection to PILI.
Sure. So I went to law school really thinking I was just going to be a patent practitioner. I was very convinced that I was just going to prosecute patents for the rest of my life, which if you've ever done that, it's very boring. And there's not a lot of human contact. You get a little bit, but it's a lot of just writing letters back and forth to the patent office. So I did a couple of internships and just realized that I wasn't super fulfilled doing that. So when I interviewed with Mayer Brown, I had a few folks start to talk to me about pro bono. And as a summer associate, I learned about the PILI program and Mayer Brown's kind of sponsorship of the PILI program. And so after my summer, I did a term as a PILI intern, and then I did a term as a PILI fellow, and I conjoined them. So I was basically at Carpel's Legal Aid for about 8 months as a PILI. And Carpel's is a legal aid hotline where pre-pandemic you would meet with clients at the courthouse. They would bring you their court papers. Sometimes judges would even like kick the clients out of their courtrooms and say like, go talk to Carpel's. You clearly don't know why you're here. And so they would come talk to us and kind of we would help them diagnose their legal situation and at least give them some basic advice on next steps. And so I did that all the way through studying for the bar exam. And then when I joined as a first-year associate at Mayer Brown, I continued on Carpel's board. I'm still on the associate board. I still did some volunteering work, but that's kind of also converged my relationship with PILI into one with Mayer Brown, where now to the extent that PILI has any connections to Mayer Brown, I make an effort to attend on behalf of Mayer Brown or with other Mayer Brown folks. So that's been kind of my path. I'm no longer a patent prosecutor. I didn't do that at all after I joined at Mayer Brown. I realized that litigation is what I really love to do. So I now do largely products liability litigation and intellectual property.
Chris, tell us about
Christopher Johnson. I have been in practice for 12 years. I started off, in law school, I was an evening student. I was a patent paralegal and decided during law school that I was going to do the softer side, so trademarks, copyrights. I got a LLM in intellectual property with every intent of that's what I was going to do. And subsequent to that, or during that time, met my now husband, who was a school superintendent here in Chicagoland area. And I found out that I passed the bar on a Friday. This would have been October 1st of 2010. And the following Monday, I was calling the various legal aid organizations. I worked full-time in law school, and law school academically was challenging for me. I worked full-time and I cleaned houses and I walked dogs. And so I was not on law review. I didn't have those stars next to my name. But what I did do is I worked really hard. And law school was a struggle, but when I passed the bar, I had this epiphany that I really, really, really wanted to be in court. So I found out that I passed October 1st, which was a Friday. And the following Monday, I called the various legal aid organizations. That was my introduction to legal aid. And I was kind of a self-starter that way, that I very much wanted to be in court. And when I tell people that when you're willing to do pro bono, you can get lots of cases. But then you find yourself with your you're learning on the job, if you will. So I was very much drawn to underrepresented people, specifically lower income women and families, children. So I started accepting representation through Chicago Volunteer Legal Services. They're an amazing organization. And the nice thing about that organization is there are lots of mentors. So if you're going to do an uncontested divorce, or you're going to do something that you're completely unfamiliar with, they will pair you. You just tell them, there may be a special training you go through, you do online, something like that, but they will pair you with a more seasoned attorney who knows what they're doing, because you won't know what you're doing. So I jumped in kind of head first. I was working full time out in Schaumburg doing insurance defense. So I started taking personal days so I could make court appearances at the Daily Center. And I loved it. I really loved it. And so I never practiced intellectual properties. I started doing pro bono with underrepresented folks, women, children, etc. And so Chicago Volunteer Legal Services, I got in with First Defense.
First Defense Legal Aid.
Yes, First Defense Legal Aid. That was, do they still exist?
Yeah,
they still
do.
exist. Okay, so that's I was on call Saturday nights there's from the time that someone is brought in by the Chicago police, taken into custody, until they are arraigned, brought before a judge, there's this gap, right? And during that gap period, as we know, kind of constitutionally, folks are entitled to an attorney, but the people that I represented on a very limited basis were lower income or low income. So I would go out to the west side, the south side, Saturday nights, 2 o'clock in the morning, and meet the person brought into custody at the police station. That was really exciting and a little scary at times. And I think my best advice is, get out there, get your toes wet, feet wet, get into it, and don't be afraid to ask for help from seasoned attorneys and make those connections. I remember there's a Judge Celia Gamreth. My first divorce, I knew she was in domestic relations at the time, and I kind of knew her, politically through my husband and I doing fundraisers. And I said, hey, will you I don't say help me out, but I'm going to have questions. I did not appear before her on the case, and she was wonderful. And the Chicago legal community is big but small, and if you are willing to accept help and kind of put yourself out there, my legal career has been pretty phenomenal in terms of people being willing to help and answer questions and be accessible. So I was a divorce attorney for 12 years, had my own firm. The pandemic hit. I went with a different firm because I closed mine and realized that after 12 years of being a divorce attorney, that was kind of run its course. So I will be joining the state's attorney's office on Monday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's all I got.
Hi, my name is Maggie Kamm. So I came to law school because I didn't know what else to do, probably like many of you, graduating in odd times. I had been a stay-at-home mom for 3 years, really unfulfilled in that role. My daughter's the best thing in my life, don't get me wrong, but I like outside interactions. So I went to law school knowing that I wanted to help people and I liked to read and write and research, ticked all the boxes. And then one of my professors brought us down to the federal courthouse to watch a case called Hively, which was a question whether or not Title VII encompassed LGBT individuals and gay people in particular under its protections. And I loved it. I loved appellate argument. I loved this question that impacted my community and people like me, and watching a organization fight for that in front of the court in a very sophisticated manner caught my attention. And I went home and wrote my cover letter for Pili that afternoon, mentioning that I had just seen that organization in action and that I really wanted to work for them. And that really motivated me throughout the rest of my 1L year. And I was lucky enough to be able to work with Lambda Legal as a 1L summer. We were doing impact litigation that benefited the LGBTQ plus community. And I loved it. I loved being able to write and research and thought I wanted to do litigation. And then I continued through law school thinking I wanted to do litigation. Then I got my feet wet in it. Realized I liked the behind the scenes stuff, but if I ever had to do a deposition, I might die. Not that I can't do it, I just don't want to do it. So I kind of looked around and thought, okay, I had gone through OCI, I had gone through sorority rush on roids, and I landed at Reed Smith, the traditional path, and okay, what do I want to do here that's not litigation? And I didn't necessarily like the idea of doing transaction work. I'm not real big into businesses. I prefer working with individuals, but I didn't want to give up my opportunity to work at such an amazing firm. And I had the Trust Estates private client services group reach out to me like, hey, we liked you. We heard that you're interested in our group. Would you like to join us? And so while the rest of my classmates were all deciding what kind of litigation they want to do, what kind of transaction they want to do, they had a whole year to decide. I got snapped up right away and found my home. And so the majority of my practice is private client services, which means we do trusts, estate planning, and estate administration for high net worth individuals, which is kind of the exact opposite. But I will say I'm kind of finding my niche. We do have a lot of our clients are very charitably inclined. So we set up private foundations, public charities for them, help them get those on the ground rolling so they can help the communities that they're in. My firm, Reed Smith, also is really passionate about pro bono work. Many of us partner with PILI, are PILI alums, and we get 140, so we get a whole month's worth of work credited for pro bono work, which in big law, I think is pretty spectacular. And from day one, it's been supported. You know, this is what you want to do. Go ahead, make sure you get your other work done. But they truly do have your back in pro bono. And I like that balance of having the sophisticated infrastructure behind me to really work on things that do make an impact, both in the broad scale, in creating public charities, and in individual people's lives.
Great. Well, thank you, three. So let's talk a little bit more about the type of pro bono work that you all are doing. And everyone kind of has a different motivation for doing pro bono work. So maybe we'll go down the same line that we did, starting with you again, Priya, with sharing a little bit about what motivates you to do pro bono, and then a little bit about some like specific projects that you've worked on, or which organizations that you've gone to for pro bono.
Sure. So when I joined Mayor Brown, I was continuing with carpools to do volunteering on the legal aid hotline. But the pro bono coordinator at Mayor Brown approached me and said, look, I have an inmate, he's been injured. He already filed his own lawsuit. Can you help just get him through discovery and see if we can get a settlement? And within, a week of me saying yes, the judge set a settlement conference. And so we started exchanging letters. And so these cases are grouped as 1983. They fall under this protection where inmates are still entitled to a certain amount of medical care and medical services. So that first inmate that I worked with, I think he's now been released, but at the time, his injury was just one of those that makes you think, come on, seriously, like somebody can do something about this and it won't be that expensive. So our entire mission was really working with Judge Castillo to say, isn't there a remedy we can work out here with the state? Isn't there something we can do? And so we had an in-person settlement conference, I think it was 2017. So it was one of those times where the judge would come to our room, talk to us for a little while, our inmate was on the screen, and then he would go to another room and talk to them. And it was this back and forth where I really got to know the inmate a little bit more and got to know a little bit more about what his experience is actually like when he asks for medical services. It's actually extremely difficult for them. And so going through that experience and having the benefit of the pro bono coordinator with me, who he's had many years of experience with these kinds of cases, having him sit next to me and say, look, this is how you present something to a judge. It was more than just like good litigation experience and good litigation sense. It was also, here's how you can actually help somebody who's disadvantaged by an institution. It's not because his own personal circumstances are so bad, but it's that the institution won't help him with like a basic medical need. So that 1983 case led to me taking two more. One we have now actually involves an inmate who's from my hometown. We went to the same high school. And it's one of those things where when I drive up to that jail and I go to meet him, it actually feels like this is personal, right? These are doctors who are in the same community that my parents still go get medical help. And so it felt like this is somewhere where I can make a tangible difference that actually affects the community I grew up in. So we're working with this inmate. When he filed the lawsuit, he filed against the jail, he filed against the medical staff at the jail, and then he filed against a bunch of correctional officers who basically kept reprimanding him for asking for medical help. And that was one of those things that just felt so egregious. Somebody's getting angry at you for asking for medical help. How does it get worse than that? So that's really where I've started to lean now, is these 1983 cases. Luckily, when you are a lawyer taking these cases pro bono, federal judges are typically pretty understanding that you probably have a client docket that's not going to be one you can easily shift around. So they're relatively reasonable about deadlines. They're relatively reasonable when something comes up or you can't be in court. But the judges, at least I found in the Northern District, are actually very thankful that attorneys will take these cases, and they want junior associates and younger attorneys to get the experience out of these. So that's kind of another draw to keep doing these cases, right? You learn a little bit more each time and you get better at it. And so you can get a faster result next time, or you can learn something more. I took 13 depositions in 2 months during the pandemic. So I got really good at Zoom depositions. But it was all because this pro bono case just had this discovery deadline. I knew that I couldn't move all of my other client deadlines. So we just pushed to get everything done on time. And that actually ultimately resolved, and we've gotten a partial settlement for this client, and we still have some defendants left standing. So anyway, my story is that I started with carpals. It's still very near and dear to me. And I've done a lot of, because I have an IP background, I'm a registered patent attorney. I do some transactional kind of pro bono work, some kind of one-off pro bono projects, but my heart really lies in 1983.
Great.
And if you don't know that 13 depositions in 2 months is and I'm trying not to swear,
No.
is a humongous amount of depositions. And not to crosstalk. When I started off, representing low-income folks through Chicago Volunteer Legal Services. I kind of got my feet wet or toes wet with divorces, and then I kind of wanted to try probate, because they
It's wild.
they play together, right? They're kind of on the same hand, if you will. So through Chicago Volunteer Legal Services, I went through their training for guardianships and to become a court-appointed GAL for disabled adults. So I made my business, so where I earned the dough enough to kind of keep afloat, doing divorces, and I wanted I wanted to continue to do pro bono and wanted to kind of broaden my practice, my own knowledge and practice area and legal skills. So through Chicago Volunteer Legal Services, I went through their training to become a court-appointed guardian ad litem for disabled adults. And that experience was, and the judges really are wholeheartedly so appreciative, because at a very base level, it helps them. It helps the court system to be more efficient, because people who are self-represented, representing themselves, really do not understand the archaicness of the judicial system and how slowly it moves and deadlines. So judges' calls will get really jammed up with self-represented litigants who don't know what they're doing. And it's okay, we don't expect them. However, they are held, they're supposed to be held to the same standard as someone who is represented by an attorney. So you'll have some judges who really are kind of bent over backwards, but other judges who maybe aren't so understanding of that that litigants, experiences and limitations. So I did GAL work. My most recent pro bono case was a woman who had come to me for I'm trying to think if it was for a divorce or not. Maybe it wasn't for a divorce. And I did not take the case through one of the legal aid organizations. She came in and I got her financial information, and she really struggled financially. And she has a disabled daughter who was becoming an adult, or about to turn 18. And the adult, her daughter, had Down syndrome, or has Down syndrome. So and COVID was going on during this, so I got to meet. I never met either of them in person. It was all through Zoom. But that case, and I did get mom to have guardianship over her adult daughter. That special needs people, or people with some challenges, has always kind of been near and dear to my heart. And when you can, you feel it, and you touched on this, where you are making an impact. And as a divorce attorney, I've fought over rocking chairs and hand towels and crate and barrel coffee tables and things that really, in the grand scheme of things, quite frankly, did not feel like I was enriching the world. And I'm just being frank about that. A lot of divorce can be not just contentious, but you're fighting over things that really don't matter. And pro bono really gives you the opportunity to fight about things that really do matter. So services for people that either can't access them because of financial limitations, or their life experiences don't lend to a system of laws and that are really foreign to folks. So pro bono is really one of those things that you really can make a difference. And that sounds kind of cliche. And this is what a dork I am. I'm actually getting chills talking about this, because it really is that rewarding. I mean, it really is. Even if you're practice area, and for me, again, I spent a lot of time in court fighting about Pyrex and Tupperware and things that I was kind of like, come on, people. So making sure that mom could make decisions for her adult daughter to receive the services and talk to Social Security and get the services that this person with severe Down syndrome really needed, that enriches your soul and makes it kind of all worthwhile.
For sure.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that. As I mentioned, I started more on the impact side of pro bono with the big organizations, but as soon as I started at Reed Smith, I got a call from a partner. Hey, I picked up this case through Pilly, and I was told it was an eviction case, but it turns out it's probate. You're in probate, here you go. And it got landed on my desk my very first day at work. And turns out it was a DIY will situation, and those never, ever go well, ever. And, I picked it up. I worked directly with an individual. He was, forcefully evicted from his aunt's home, but her estate had never been probated. What do we do to fix this and get him somewhere safe out of a homeless shelter and back with a roof over his head, because he had been living as his aunt's caregiver. And just seeing the impact it made on an individual's life kind of pulled me down to earth, so to speak. And I started picking up more individual projects. My firm has a really great relationship with Pilly. We go to your fair every year, and I picked up a few probate cases where maybe we just needed letters of office or a small state affidavit, just the little things that, as you mentioned, probate court is antiquated and weird, and even litigation attorneys frequently walk into my office and say, okay, I need to open this litigation matter, but it's with a dead person's estate. What do I do? And quite frankly, the answer is, I don't know, but I'll find out. Because probate court is so wonky. So the majority of my pro bono experience tends to be in the probate side of things. I've done wills for heroes, where we draft wills, wills and powers of attorney for local law enforcement and firefighters. That's a fair that happens a few times a year prior to COVID, and I think they're starting up again, where attorneys can go and advise people on how to just fill out a basic will. And that's something that's really important. And one of my favorite things about estate planning is I help people take care of their families. When I administer an estate, it's the worst part of these people's lives, especially the surviving spouses. And if I can go, they took care of everything in this document, you are taken care of, do not worry. They're no longer here and I cannot replace that, but I can make sure that your life doesn't change for the worse in any other way. To be able to do that for individuals who might not be able to afford an estate plan is huge. And I take a lot of pride in that. And at the same time, I'm also tapped a lot by as I mentioned, by our litigation associates and partners to help out with that. If their pro bono case, someone died and their family's trying to get recompense for that, they need to open up an estate and I'm the one to do it. I got to help, and I can say this because it's public, I got to help with Ahmaud Arbery's estate. I got to advise his mother about that. And they couldn't have moved forward on the civil claims if they had not handled the probate and gotten her the authority to move forward with that. And so a lot of what I do on the pro bono side is behind the scenes. I help people apply for tax exempt status. I help review bylaws. I'll open up probate estates. I'll draft wills. But it really does make an impact on people's lives, maybe not in such a showy way, but it's in a way that I'm capable of doing it in.
That's great. So as I say, almost every time we have a panel, I have my list of questions, but I want to make sure that you all get the answers that you want from our panelists. So please tell us over Zoom or in the room if you have questions. I'll ask one more and then turn it to you all. There are also a lot of obstacles to doing pro bono, if we're being real. You all have busy lives. Maggie, you have a daughter, two children now. So, spouses and friends and, or having, a case that you really want to take, but that's in a law that you have, in an area of law you don't have experience in. So, maybe tell us a little bit about if you've had pro bono obstacles and how you've overcome them. I'll open it to whoever wants to jump in first, maybe.
2,000 hours a year. It's a lot with 2 kids and a commute. Not gonna lie, it's this year in particular has been hard to find time for pro bono, just with life events going on. But I will say that firms are generally really supportive, or at least big firms are generally really supportive of pro bono. And if you can get over finding the time to do it, it's a great way to learn an area of law that you need to learn with supervision, because you're still expected to give the same excellence that you would give a paying client, but you can take longer to do it and no one's yelling at you about your bills. So overcoming it, I would say rely a lot upon the infrastructure that you have behind you. If you're at a public interest organization or with a firm, you have people there that want this to work and want this to succeed, because very few people are, Joe Dirt Moneybag's partner that think this is stupid. Even partners that focus 99% of their time on billable work understand that pro bono and it enriches the legal field and enriches people's lives, and they want you to succeed. So I say something similar to that I say to all young associates: don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the biggest mistake I see with young and junior associates, is not asking questions, whether it's something that they don't know or if it's asking for something. So ask the questions, and if you can make the time, you'll often find that there's people behind you supporting you.
I think, so I know there was one question that was asked, I think before the panel, about if you're at a place where there's not really institutionalized pro bono. I'm very fortunate at Mayor Brown to have like a very institutional program, but a lot of times I get questions from people who've seen my name on court filings for like a similar case. They want to file something similar. So they'll reach out to the pro bono director at Mayor Brown, or they'll reach out to me directly and say, hey, can you give me some advice about this? So one way to kind of work your way through a new pro bono project or a system that you don't know is to really find your support in the community. I took an immigration case. We were one of the first family separation cases in Chicago that turned into a family reunification case, luckily. But that was one instance where we needed the support of the National Immigrant Justice Center. We needed the support of attorneys who actually spoke a variety of languages so that we could actually communicate with clients. And we were all kind of learning. That was the first time I'd ever worked on an injunction. So that was, for me, even as a litigator, like a totally new, basically everything was new to me within the law. I knew where the courthouse was, and that was about the end of it. So that was, I think, one of the major obstacles was mental, right? How do I even represent somebody when I don't know anything about what I'm doing here? And the answer is everybody around you has some part of the answer, and you just need to leverage that network. So for 1983 cases, we have this major listserv that's a lot of Chicago litigators who handle these cases pretty often. There's a firm in Chicago that handles 1983 cases really, really frequently. You just pick up the phone and call them. They just answer your questions for you. They give you guidance. They tell you what recent support you can find that might help you in your case. This is how Chicago legal aid works. People want to help you. But even beyond that, like within firms, there are always going to be some supporters. There are always going to be some people who just don't get pro bono. They don't get why you would do it. And you don't have to look to them for help. You can look to all of the great support systems. And I'll say this for whatever it's worth, that Mayor Brown's pro bono director will answer any questions she gets from anybody, anywhere. So for those who are trying to start new pro bono programs, I mean, I think Reed Smith is probably the same way. I think all firms are probably, everybody with pro bono passion is probably willing to receive the same phone call, right? Hi, I'm at a new place. I don't know how to start a pro bono program here, or I don't know how to take a pro bono project at this place. What do I do? And firms that have those infrastructures in place will be happy to help give that guidance. I personally will also help try and give that guidance. But sometimes what it means is not getting billable credit for that work at the outset, right? Sometimes it means actually doing pro bono because it's for free, because you actually want to do it. And sometimes that's what it takes to show your firm, okay, this is what we can get. This is what we as a firm can get. This is what I personally can get out of these experiences. And this is how I helped somebody. And it's usually just a matter of getting your firm to sign off on the insurance and making sure you're covered by malpractice. And a lot of times they're willing to do that if you can leverage the legal aid network enough to get somebody who will sign on with you or help you in some way. So I think I answered half of a bunch of different questions. Sorry.
I would say that probably smaller firms may not have the time and dollars. I mean, that really is the reality of, one reality of doing pro bono work. If you are with a smaller, and some of you may go out and you'll work for a firm that has one or two attorneys. I mean, that really is not at the end of the day. I mean, you need to, the dollars and the time. What they might allow you to do is to take on a pro bono case. So you may not, I would say recalcitrant. I'd probably be leery of in a smaller firm saying, let's start a pro bono program. I mean, they may kind of, there may be some significant institutional obstacles to that, because the reality is, I mean, down to like making copies. I mean, every dollar in a smaller firm, and I had my own firm for, 10 years, the margins are very tight with rent and copies. But what you may be able to do is have the person that you're working with, that you're getting waivers for the filing fee, making sure that it's not, they're probably not going to sign on if it's going to cost them anything. I would bet the $23 in my wallet that a smaller firm's not going to foot the bill for filing fees and things like that. So, but if you are passionate about pro bono work and you're getting your work done, and another way to kind of leverage that is to say, this may open up a bigger book of business, because and for me, and I was a solo and then hired an associate and had a paralegal when I was had my own firm. So the judges that I appeared in front of doing pro bono work, they really liked me a whole lot. And that didn't mean that subsequent down the line that I got anything special out of it. And not but, I was certainly accorded a certain, I don't know what that was, in domestic relations. So it really did kind of open doors for me as I grew my practice as someone who, and I started my firm with $0, 0 loans, nothing from my parents, and that's not a gripe, that's just, I wanted my own firm. I wanted to kind of run the show and, and fail on my own or succeed on my own. So the fact that I had, when I started my firm and I had appeared in front of lots of judges and they knew me from doing pro bono work, that really did open doors to court appointments. That opened a door for me to teach at Loyola Law School. So I did 83 hearings. I was pro bono attorney of the year, something crazy like that. So in Illinois, you get a DUI, and because the possibility of incarcerations, and don't quote me constitutionally here, I'll be close, is greater than 6 months, or greater, I think it's greater than 6 months. You get if you can afford an attorney, a private attorney, you get the public defender's office. What you don't get is an attorney for the civil component, which is the revocation of your Illinois driver's license. Now, for many folks, the license is really, while they're going through the DUI process, meaning that's being not litigated, but that's being tried or whatever they're going to do with that, getting to and from work is a matter of putting bread on the table for their family. I had people say to me, "You're putting drunks back out on the road." I mean, that was kind of, that I heard that from lots of people actually. But the reality is this: you're not there to fix, and you're not equipped to nor trained to fix if this person has a drug or alcohol problem. You're really not. And really kind of understanding that is a challenge. Really understanding to stay in your lane as an attorney. If you want to do this particular work, the way that I not rationalized it, but this lady's a single mom. He's a single dad. He has to go to work to put food on the table. So, that's what I did. So I did 82 or 83 license revocation hearings through the Chicago Bar. And those were really great. So, but there are challenges. I mean, you may have clients, you will have clients who are, for a variety of reasons, are very challenging people. And their life circumstances just kind of exacerbates that. So and that's not to discourage anyone from doing pro bono whatsoever. I still do it. I love it. I hope to always, knock on Formica, I hope to always do it. My first attorney complaint through the ARDC was from a pro bono client. So, because he would call the office 14 times a day. And I couldn't talk to him 14 times a day because I had started my own business, I was running my own business. So 14 phone calls a day from any client is really 13 too many. It's about 13 3/4 too many, actually. So he filed, it was my first ARDC complaint, which of course you have 14 days to respond to in writing. I was still representing him. So I was still going to court for someone who I could lose my law license. So there was kind of some resentment there. Went before Judge Lopez, and I filed a motion to withdraw from this client that I represented, whose name was James Bond, who looked nothing like James Bond, kind of the polar opposite of James Bond. And he was a very nice guy, but he really had an expectation that I was his only client, and he was going to, have my sole focus, and that just really wasn't the situation. So I had to get out of that case. I didn't feel bad about that because it was a pending ARDC complaint against me, and I resolved that. That was fine, but there are hurdles and obstacles and challenges, and I would say, roll with it.
Yeah,
it's not all rainbows and sunshine. It's rewarding, but it's
I'll echo that. Sometimes the hardest part about pro bono is the people that you're helping. There's been a few times I've also had the client, where's my check? Got 20 calls in a day, and that I handed it off to the junior associate. Yeah. And it's just sometimes it's really hard to work. You're burnt out on your end, you have expectations, then you have someone that you are their last hope in a lot of situations, and you're catching the brunt of all their frustration and anger and the institutionalized problems that they're dealing with. And you have to be able to compartmentalize that. Now, if they filed an ARDC claim, I would definitely withdraw.
Never give them your personal cell phone.
Never.
And I mean that a judge told me this literally 15 years ago, a judge that I met out in California, I'm sorry.
No.
And the judge said, wonderful judge, my husband and I met, he's married, wonderful man. And the judge said, never give clients your personal cell phone, because they will, they use it.
They do.
They use it.
And yeah,
Never.
It's hard, but you
Never.
can't blame them because
Right.
they have nowhere else to turn.
Right.
And it's just kind of meeting people where they're at. Not that, but just because it's understandable doesn't make it easy, and your feelings are completely valid. And just it's pushing through that.
Okay. Any questions in the room or in chat? Caitlin, I know you did before about developing a relationship with a legal aid agency. Do you want to ask that? Or I can ask it for you. And this is what Priya kind of touched on. But it was, how do you go about developing a relationship with an organization that either maybe your firm doesn't already have a relationship with, or maybe it's pro bono that you've never done or the firm's never done? How would you go about doing that? Maggie, do you want to maybe start us?
Sure. I've brought in a few projects. You just have to be the squeaky wheel. I would start networking outside of your organization, meet people who you want to work with and who could support you, and then bring it in, but make sure you have a plan. Don't just, hey, I want to do this. Okay, well, how are we going to do this? Do they qualify? Because a lot of firms, the ones that have the resources to do it and have formal pro bono programs, do have standards, that you have to see their W-2s, you have to know their income level. Do they truly qualify? Or is this like new and novel and going to make the firm look good? You have to have a plan. And as a junior associate, or as just even a mid-level associate, it's not always easy to kind of pitch that to partners when there's billable work to be done. But I think the more sophisticated you can make it, and the more you can make it make sense for the firm, the more likely you are to have people kind of pick it up. And if you know that you have the outside support that you can show the firm, hey, this will not take away from anyone. This is something that we can do and do well. And we have the support of this outside organization who has our back. That all makes it much more likely that they're going to pick it up and run with it.
If you are a solo or with a small firm, the best thing you can do is to partner with a established organization. So let's say your firm, the firm you're with, does not do pro bono. Okay, fine. Reach out to CVLS. And they carry for you, or for the cases, not for you, but malpractice insurance. You don't, it's plug and play. I mean, it literally is that. When I say easy, you don't need to be concerned about whether or not this potential client qualifies for, as a low-income person. You're not looking at a tax return, you're not looking at a financial affidavit to make a determination whether or not they qualify or should qualify for pro bono rather. So I really cannot say, and I worked with Metropolitan Legal Services, I worked with CVLS was one that was just kind of my go-to because they have everything in place. Like, oh, you want to try probate? Okay, well, here's the 6 videos to watch, or here's a seminar to come to, and you can go do probate. And here's, Maggie or Priya, and they've been doing it for 10 years, and reach out to, seriously, it's that when I say easy, there are built-in guardrails that you're not going to go off the road. You're really not.
And even large firms rely on them. I've worked on a few immigration and refugee cases where, I can do all the research, but I filled out the forms that the immigration court needs, but I flip them to the public interest organization we're working with because they have the expertise. And they'll even give you the clients because they have so many that they can't handle them internally. So
and they pre-screen them so that you are
for sure.
For sure. Right. For sure. So that would be if you were with a smaller firm and to say, okay, I reached out to CVLS and the other legal aid organizations. Also, you can say, I have an hour a week that I can devote to this. I have 2 hours a week as the attorney, and be realistic about that. So, oh my God, I'm a new associate and I have a huge, but I still want to do pro bono. And here's how much time realistically I can devote to a case.
Right.
1 hour a week.
Yep.
And CVLS, they will pair you with an appropriate case that, okay, this is an uncontested divorce, this is a will, or, this client or this case is appropriate for a, kind of dip the toe in. We don't need, you don't need to go out there and do the case. You don't need to do the case. You really don't.
And what's nice about these organizations, again, is you can tell them your expertise too. I can say, hey, I'm in trust estates and probate, and they'll give me, here are the things that need people that know how to do what you do. And then I'm not spinning my wheels trying to learn how to do like a copyright or something for a struggling author. I can help someone fill out a small estate affidavit. I can help someone probate an intestate estate. I can use my expertise in a way that's most efficient and still do good for someone.
There's also, I don't know if it would be under the penumbra of pro bono, but I volunteered, tutored for the Minority Legal Education Review, MLER, for 7 or 8 years. So that's an organization that if you don't have the time to be in court, to do litigation, there are other opportunities out there to impact the legal community or the future attorneys, where I volunteer tutored for the Illinois Bar for 7 years. I mean, that, and was later asked to join the board of MLER. That was very impactful as well. So even if you don't have the time or the resources, X, Y, and Z, you can always mentor. You can always tutor. There's lots and lots of opportunities out there.
So I think kind of related to that is this broader concept that you can find an opportunity that'll fit whatever you want or need. A lot of times Philly is a really good gateway for that because Philly is so well connected that they know what all the legal aid agencies do, and they can tell you, okay, this is the kind of work you're looking for, this is how you might find it. So for me, Carpels was a really good fit because I didn't want to take on a lot of client cases. I just wanted to help people kind of pre-screen wherever, like evaluate where you are, figure out what you do next. And so you don't take any papers home with you. You just go sit on the hotline, you just answer questions, and then you leave, and then it's done. And the emotions are the only thing that follow you. It's nothing else. And so there were times where I would talk to, for my 2-hour volunteer window, I would talk to the same client for 2 hours. We would spend that 2 hours unpacking first why they were getting evicted, because they didn't have money. Well, why don't you have money? Because my wages are being garnished. Well, why are your wages being garnished? Well, it's because there was a judgment against me. Well, why was there a judgment against you? Well, they sent my credit card bills to my old address. Okay, that's not proper service. So the whole thing needs to be undone. But how does that help you right now? And so it was kind of talking through with clients, these are all of the different legal systems that have put you in this situation. You tomorrow need to go to this legal aid organization and ask for this kind of help. And then they will help you unpack it, but this is what I can do for you today.
And sometimes I'm sorry,
Yep.
folks do not know, they think I need a will, when in fact, it's unsecured debt.
Yeah.
Right? They'll say, hey, Maggie, I need this. And then you tease out, as an attorney, as a good lawyer, you tease out the story and you're like, no, you really.
No, that's exactly what happened. I had an eviction case turn into a probate case.
Right.
And I think, so as a Pili intern is when I learned kind of this skill at Carpels, because they can call with 3 categories of problems. They can call with eviction problems, they can call with marital relations, and then other kind of commercial issues. So like garnishing, whatever kind of things might happen to you at Daily Center that results in you not getting the money that you're entitled to. But then there's this kind of 4th bucket for people who were registered attorneys at the time, and I was not. I was just a law student. So what I could do was pick up the phone, and basically it was information gather enough to issue spot. And as a legal student, that's great. That's exactly what law school wants you to learn. And that actually served me really well at the bar, because what I learned is if you can explain personal jurisdiction to somebody who's never heard about law before, then you are very comfortable doing it for the bar exam. Like, personal jurisdiction by that point. And a lot of times we did have people call from Indiana and say, I want to come to Chicago and get a divorce. Why do you want to come to Chicago to get a divorce? Like, what's in Chicago? What's special to you here? And sometimes that would kind of, unravel the whole story. So I think you can actually find pro bono projects that really fit whatever you're looking for. I've done cases where we did like a 50-state survey of where the laws stand everywhere. And it was basically just researching, and that's easy enough to do, like Sunday morning for an hour or something. And then you close up your computer, you put it away, and it's done. And it's not a whole client matter. So there are legal aid agencies that do a little bit of everything. Pili is a really great gateway. Even law schools are really great gateways to helping you navigate where can you go, who can you talk to, who can help you find a project like what you have time for and bandwidth for.
We only have a few minutes left, but one question that came up that I want to ask was, do you think it's okay to ask about pro bono in an interview with the firm? How do you kind of gauge whether the firm supports pro bono? A lot of times that's helpful when you're trying to be part of a like-minded group. But you also don't want them to then tag you as the one who's going to be, pushing them to, create a whole pro bono program when they're not ready. So how do you kind of navigate that?
I'd say for law students, like I think NELP is really helpful because on NELP profiles, you can usually see pro bono information. You can also, like if there's a pro bono director at the firm, then they probably got something in place.
Right.
But you can also, a little bit of this, I think, is kind of digging around your own research. And just like, so for me, I would Google Mayor Brown and then in quotes pro bono and find out, if nothing comes up and there's just 0 results, and there's probably not a whole lot going on there. But when I search Mayor Brown and pro bono, I think I'll get close to 4,000 hits. So that's kind of a first level. For laterals, I'm not super sure. Beyond that, what else you might try though?
I would wholeheartedly agree with your assessment. I would refrain, it's on you. So do your due diligence, and you're looking at 3 or 4 firms, you have interviews. I would find out as much, use your alumni network, see who works there in terms of non-part associates, and see what they're doing. That I would refrain from. More often than not, if you've done some pro bono or volunteer work, it may be on your resume. That could be a way of cluing them in, them being the potential firm or the firm that you are interviewing with, that this is an interest. I've had lots of folks say, oh, you worked with CVLS. Oh, so a little bit on your resume showcases your interest in service and pro bono work without it looking like you're pushing, I would say pushing an agenda, but that you're going to maybe not, So I think that A, doing your due diligence, and B, it appearing somewhere in your resume to clue them in that this is something that you feel passionate about or strongly about, or or that you're interested in would be a nice way without a overt, when do I get my first pro bono case? Or I've reached out to pro bono organizations and I'm ready to take a case. I would think during an interview, that's not going to go like you want it to go,
Yeah, and
realistically.
beyond just the whole idea of maybe pushing an agenda, firms don't want people who are going to stay there just to pay off their student loans and then go join a public interest organization. I'm saying that because it's OCI season and many of you are probably interviewing or getting ready to. And I am a first generation attorney. I did not know a single attorney before I went to law school, except my husband's aunt who lives in Nashville, and I met her once, so that doesn't count. And I had only had exposure to the legal community through public interest, and so that's what I knew how to talk about. And I'm not gonna lie, because it's all I knew how to talk about, it kind of was a detriment. I'm very lucky that I'm at Reed Smith because it is such a huge push there. It's not that you can't talk about it, but you want to be able to talk about other substantive things. You want to be able to talk about the billable work that they're known for and that they're renowned for within the community. So like Christopher mentioned, make your judgment call, make sure you research the firm that you're talking to, and make sure that you know how to talk to the firm about more than just pro bono if you do bring it up.
So just one final question. Let's just go down, and if there was one piece of advice that you would give to new lawyers about pro bono, or anything else to be a new lawyer, just as a final tips for our last session of the Philly summer. Priya, let's start with you again.
Sure. My biggest piece of advice for all new lawyers for everything is to ask for help, because you probably don't know all the things you don't know. And when you start to talk through issues is when you start to realize that there are things you don't know, but somebody else might help issue spot for you. Or they might be able to point you to a resource that you never would have known existed. So ask for help within your network, ask for help outside of your network. Now you know the three of us, you can ask us for help. Pilly, you can ask Pilly for help. But don't be afraid, because no one's going to think that you don't know anything. Everyone's going to assume that you probably don't know that much. And now is the best time to ask those questions.
Great. Chris, final piece of advice?
Not to echo, but that's fabulous advice. Ask questions. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to tackle something that is new or different, and at the same time, simultaneously or concurrently, ask lots of questions. Ask lots of questions. Utilize your resources. And, don't be afraid to ask questions, because there's not an expectation as a brand new. I also am the first generation. I did not know anyone that went to law school. So I was really navigating something that I didn't know really anything about. It was all new. I didn't know where to stand. I didn't know what to wear. I didn't know anything. And that's kind of cool and exciting, but also scary is stuff. So utilize, make the connections in the community. Don't be afraid to reach out to folks and have fun with it. It really is it's a tremendous amount of fun.
You guys both stole mine. I would say something that I'm personally struggling with as someone who, had COVID smack dab in the middle of her beginning years, is build your network. It's real easy to want to close your laptop and go home. And this is something that is my personal biggest struggle, is close my laptop, see I can make the 5:30 train and I run. But really, your practice is only richer if you meet more people. I'm not saying like you have to go to every cocktail hour, but you can come to things like this, grow your network so you have people to ask questions to. And that's something that I'm finding more and more valuable as I continue to come up in my practice, and something I wish I was able to have done earlier. But I don't like Zoom, and 2 years of COVID kind of put a damper in that.
Well, thank you, Priya, Chris, and Maggie. And thank you everyone for joining us over our summer Philly educational seminars. Hope you've gained skills and lessons that you'll incorporate into your career, whether it's in pro bono or public interest, but hope you keep kind of the ideals of access to justice and the skills that we've talked about all summer to heart. I hope I see a lot of you on Thursday for Pili interns and fellows at our end of summer reception. And then throughout, in months and years to come. Thank you and hope you keep in touch and stay connected with Pili. So thank you. Have a great journey. Bye. And thank you.
Of course.
Where are you?